probably the biggest game
Oh God.
this weekend, next to Texas, Bama, I would say Nebraska versus Colorado. Chris, what are your thoughts about Colorado?
I think anybody that follows the show knows, we've had to come on here and admit that we're wrong about Colorado, week one anyway. Yep. We did that. I'm not going to talk about that part of it. But what I will talk about was offensively, they looked elite. 510 yards by Shedeur Sanders, 4 touchdowns. Damn near had like a 90% completion percentage. I mean, it was amazing. Okay, cool. But again, on the opposite side of that, if we're going to touch on TCU for just a second, was I more impressed about Colorado's offense or Colorado as a whole, or was I more let down or disappointed in TCU as a whole? I would say TCU on my end, and that's not an excuse. It just TCU looked flat, didn't care. They were at home. Defense was absolutely atrocious. I don't know. But going forward here, which is where we're headed with this, Colorado against Nebraska, in my opinion, if they want to, I think they obviously have a chance, and we'll get to our predictions here, but they're going to have to be able to run the ball a little bit better, I think. Nebraska's defense looked really good against Minnesota. Now, we don't know what Minnesota is offensively or that much really defensively. We don't know that, but I think that Colorado even knows that. Dion talked about it this week already. We're going to have to be able to run the football. We can't be throwing for 500 yards a game and chucking it around the field. I think they can do that. But it's Nebraska, I think, is a little bit more physical team than TCU. Let's just throw that out there. If you disagree with me, feel free to drop it in the comments. My big thing is also with Colorado. I love Travis Hunter, Christian. We talk about him. He's all over the internet playing both ways, 120 some odd snaps. They can't be doing that the rest of the year. We've touched on this a couple of times, Christian. I think you agree. You're going to get the kid killed. He's an amazing athlete, but Colorado needs him. They need him a lot for the season upcoming. Here's my other thing. Defense, I touched on it. I think this is the big thing if you're Colorado and you're pulling for Colorado in this game. They gave up well over 500 yards in that game against TCU. And TCU probably could have ran the ball a hell of a lot more than what they did, especially in the fourth quarter there. They almost gave up 300 on the ground. Nebraska's predominantly, from what we've seen after a small sample size, is a running team. Whether it's Jeff Sims, they're going to give obviously Christian, you're going to touch on Nebraska here, but we got a ton of running backs back there. So my case for Colorado is I think that the defensive side of the ball, they're going to have to be better. Dion talked about it for this game. I think Nebraska's, obviously defensively is better, than TCU, but they're going to have to do something here to shore this up a little bit. Nebraska's going to be a more physical team. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you're definitely not wrong about that. Speaking about Nebraska, hopefully I can do the Nebraska man proud right here because that game was tough to watch, right? I mean, Nebraska, Minnesota, Nebraska's offense looked lost at times. I mean, it just did. I mean, the offense struggled to get much going and looked out of rhythm all night. I mean, Sims had 3 turnovers. On his own right. Nebraska had 4 total turnovers. I think the big thing from this, too, is Minnesota has a potential top 25 defense. I mean, last year they were top 10. They looked pretty good again and were able to take advantage of turnovers all night long. So that might continue, right? Sims also had 91 yards on 19 carries, which I'd like to see to go more of the running backs, obviously. I'd like the running backs to be more involved here. They got to keep Sims healthy. The biggest takeaway that I have from Sims in this performance was I think he showed you exactly what he showed you at Georgia Tech, which was a big, strong kid who can run the ball 19, 20 times, might get banged up from doing that, has a great arm and can make just about all the throws you want him to make, but is interception prone. Is decision-making prone. And when you get in one of those games where you got to have it, can he win you the game by throwing the ball? That's my biggest question that I have about Jeff Sims, that I need to see cleaned up if you're going to win a lot of games in the Big Ten or even against Colorado. Colorado's defense, though, I will say this, they should be much easier to run the ball on. I personally believe TCU, I mean, they weren't as physical, Chris. They weren't as physical on both sides of the ball as I initially had believed.
No.
That could be an advantage right there for Nebraska. Their defense, on the other hand, Chris, they looked lights out. But the thing with that is it's a question mark of an offense that Minnesota was trotting out there. What I mean by that is at the end of the year, when we look back at Minnesota's offense, where are they going to be at in the grand scheme of things? Was Nebraska's defense that much better? And I will say this, they did look improved, especially in open space and making tackles. But are they elite? Are they lights? Or are they, you know what I'm saying? Like, is Minnesota's offense that good to where you can say Nebraska's defense is elite yet? And I don't know. I don't have a big enough sample size for that. I say all this really because Nebraska runs that 3-3-5 defense, same as TCU. But if Colorado doesn't come correct, or Nebraska doesn't make some of those changes, which I think they'll make coming into this game, it's going to be a long day for the Skurs, dude. It just is. And I'm gonna kind of add this to it. I think this is a kind of a long rant here, but literally, I think it's impossible to play any worse on defense than what TCU did against Colorado. Did they? I'm trying to think back in my head. I don't even know if they stopped Colorado. They might have maybe made them punt once, if that.
Yeah, I think there was one turnover by Colorado, and that was pretty much it in that game. As far as Colorado mistakes offensively, they didn't make any. And is that Colorado's offense, Christian, or is it just TCU's defense is just that bad?
I think it was a combination of both. Honestly, I think it was a little bit of both. I think I was a little too high on TCU. I will say that, and I was a little too low on Colorado. That's the way, and I know we both have kind of said that. I think we were both a little bit too high on TCU and too low on Colorado. Now, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? It's a long season yet. I'm not saying that we're 100% wrong yet, but I will say this: that team that took the field in TCU, and the linebacker talked about it last 2 times they've been on the field. They've gotten that defense has been the laughing stock of college football. So for me, I was also like to say I was a little higher on Nebraska, I think, before I saw the Minnesota game, and now I'm kind of not downgrading Nebraska a whole lot, but I'm looking at this with a lot more question marks, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because I was watching something today, and I think it was the Doc Diagnosis, and he talks about this. And one of the things he said was they asked him, he stares down his reads a little too much, and the co-host said, "Hey, is this something that we can?" we can change, and he said, and that's, and I agree with him. He said, no, that's not really something you can change in a week. That's something that takes a long time to be able to change. And it's almost ingrained, right? It's a comfortability thing where you got to know an offense, you got to play in it. You can't stare it down. You got to have that comfortability to look over here, right? And then at the last second, know what's going on over there to be able to make that throw. And that's what's so tough. And a week already into the season, and we're already talking about making that as a correction. That's kind of a tough thing, and I don't know. That's the big thing. I don't know if Sims is going to be able to really do that, especially in this week. Maybe if it's something they put the emphasis on a couple weeks, maybe we can see it cleaned up a little bit. But it doesn't really get much easier than that, right? Chris, I'm going to kind of make my prediction here for this game. Yeah. I'm going to go Nebraska 24. Colorado 28.
Yeah. That's tough to hear. You guys know this, man. I've been a Nebraska fan my entire life. I grew up here, born and raised. I'm from a small town, less than 100 people. Making a prediction for this game has been tough for me. I didn't say anything after the TCU game because people are already talking about this game, but it just pisses me off, Christian. It just does. And I'm not yelling at you. I'm not yelling directly at anybody in the chat. I'm not directly yelling at anybody on YouTube other than the Nebraska football team right now. But this shit fucking offends me that I have to take an overhyped Colorado team, which they are overhyped right now. Yes, they beat a TCU team that wasn't as good as everybody thought they were. Great. Here's your flowers. But where I'm pissed off about, it's not Colorado on this game. It's the fact that my fucking team can't get out of their own way for the last 10 years playing football. The penalties, the piss poor decision making from the quarterback play. This has been year in and year out for Nebraska. Clock management. crucial moments, making terrible throws and goddamn turnovers, Christian. I'm sick of it as a Nebraska fan. I really am. They did it against Minnesota. They did it under the Scott Frost era. They did it under the Mike Riley era. Hell, they even did it at the end of the Bo Pelini era, man. It's just like every fucking time that we're going to be relevant, we're going to get back to good things, you know, and it's the same shit recycled every freaking time, man. And you know what, man? We're talking predictions. This was really hard for me because, like I said, I don't love Colorado. There were our rivals back in the 90s when I was a little kid. But hats off to Colorado and the TCU victory. But, man, I'm looking at this as a realist, and I got to look at this from an outsider perspective and not get emotionally involved like I just did there. Colorado 30, Nebraska 28, man. I mean, it's tough for me to say, but give me Colorado in this game because Nebraska is yet to prove to me for 10 years that they can win a close game and not piss it down their leg. I apologize there for going off a little bit, man, but it's just, it is what it is, man.